Welcome to the Ending Sexploitation podcast, where we decode sexual harm and provide you with active solutions. I'm your host, Kaylee McNamara. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Joined once again by Danny Pinter, director of our law center. Hi, Danny. How's it going?
Good. So great to be with you, Haley.
Well, it is great to be here with you because today we're talking about some really exciting news, a historic victory, a brand new legal precedent for online platforms and their liability when it comes to sexual exploitation issues. Danny, tell us what has happened.
Yes, we're so excited. So many of you may know we represent two young men in a case against Twitter, where their abuse images were widely distributed and Twitter refused to take them down. So this case has been ongoing. The district court, kicked out the case, saying that Twitter was fully immune for this activity, and so we appealed, and it's at the Ninth Circuit, and so we briefed that, we had oral argument, and then we just have to sit and wait, and we never know when the decision's going to come. And it just came last week, and I mean, we are celebrating. It's a mixed ruling, so there's some good things and some bad things. But anytime you can get past Section 230 to hold a website accountable, you have beat all the odds. And so it's definitely a huge victory for our clients, because what people don't realize is Section 230 prevents people from having their day in court at all. It's not
Mm,
about losing the case. You don't get to bring the case. And so that's why we think it's so unjust that it's been applied so broadly, because it prevents any kind of even investigation or transparency or accountability to these platforms when grievous harm has occurred. And so this marks a huge victory, because our case can proceed to discovery, and that's where we get to ask all the questions of Twitter, now X. What were the policies at the time? What are the communications with the employees at the time? Was this email conversation back and forth between our client and Twitter employees, was that discussed within the organization? Who made the call to affirmatively refuse to take this down? And so
mhm,
just a quick recap of the facts is our clients were 13-year-old boys who were extorted on Snapchat by a sex trafficker to create sexual abuse images of themselves. This is contraband. This is known as child pornography under the law. We call it CSAM, but it is illegal to possess, illegal to distribute. It's one of our most serious crimes, and we know it's an epidemic harm facing young people right now, widely distributed online. And here was a case where not only did this occur with Snapchat, but a couple years later, when these kids were in high school, these images were being widely circulated on Twitter, and they
mm,
were being highly sexualized. Those who were sexualizing them and commenting knew that they were kids. It was very obvious they were kids. So this was just rampant child exploitation at a time when Twitter was being very criticized for their child exploitation problem. I mean, they were permitting hashtags that was facilitating an entire community of people trading child exploitation material on the platform. And so it's happening in this context. The child reaches out to Twitter, tells them that he was extorted and threatened to create this, tells them that he's a child. They actually respond, ask for his ID. He provides it. So now they can confirm he's in the video and he's a child. They respond, "We've reviewed the material, do not find a violation of our terms, and so no further action will be taken at this time." So this was an affirmative choice by Twitter to continue
mm,
distributing what they knew was contraband, was child exploitation, and they're saying this to the distressed child. As a result, our client almost, he was contemplating ending his life. This was extremely
mm,
harmful, extremely serious. And so it was a travesty and an injustice that Section 230 would have been applied to this case at all. But
mm.
this is where we reach the partial victory. And so, not only did Twitter, disregard our client and continue profiting from known child exploitation, but they didn't even report it to NCMEC, which is required under federal law to do. And so that's
Mhm.
something we pointed out as well. We said that's negligence per se. In other words, if you violate the law, that's negligence. We don't really need to prove if you're reckless or not. Breaking the law is negligence. And
Mhm.
we also allege some product liability claims for how difficult it was to report CSAM. We argued that was intentionally by design. You could report all kinds of violations very quickly with a simple button, but you had to go locate some separate form to report child exploitation, and then they didn't handle it well at all. And so the Ninth Circuit said that Twitter does not receive Section 230 immunity for those products liability claims for this bad reporting and for their failure and negligence in not reporting this content to NCMEC, which they were required to do. So that's amazing, amazing news. And then I can kind of dig into some of the things I'm disappointed about, but I'll stop and let you
Mhm.
interject, Haley, because I've been
No,
rambling.
this is no, not rambling at all, and I'm so glad you went back to tell the story of how we got here because I just think we cannot skim past the reality that
Right.
that young boy has faced, and to be exploited, for it to be shared online, for that to circulate among people that you know who are now seeing videos of your sexual abuse and then bullying you for it and seeing comments from strangers online who are consuming that material. That kind of trauma is
Yeah.
horrific. And the fact that Twitter said that they reviewed the material and found that it did not violate their policies is insane because I'm not a lawyer, but I have seen 13 and 14-year-old boys, and it is very obvious that they are not
Exactly.
adults. And first of all, also Twitter, it was Twitter at the time, so that's why we're saying Twitter, now it's X, but has a policy allowing pornography, which then allows this content to flourish. They're having no kind of age verification or consent verification to make sure that it's only adults and consensual people have like with videos on there. So they create like an environment that is I argue like fosters the sharing
Yeah.
of non-consensual material and child material, sex trafficking material. And then so they create that environment. It's so clear so that so first of all of these sites will say, well, we hash child sexual abuse materials, the NICMIX tool, which helps them to proactively identify previously identified and known videos of child abuse. And they'll say, so we don't have to do anything else because if we do that, clearly we're the good guys. But no, because you're not proactively finding new material, which most material is new of child sexual abuse material. It's not just the same, those the same videos do get shared over and over in those videos, but new content is constant in high demand. And so you create this environment that allows pornography with no safety measures. You are not proactively searching for child sexual abuse. Then it gets reported to you and you don't just look at the video and say this person's clearly underage and they're reporting it for this purpose. So let's just maybe take it down and err on the side of listening to the survivor. They have the child send in his ID and still don't take it down. And at the time of that ID, he was still a minor,
Yeah, he was
showing that it
still
was him.
16. So it's
He was a minor
indisputable.
and they still don't take it down. And that's insane. And in what
It's
world would a
absolutely
company
insane.
act this way unless they had that immunity that they think that they have because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act? It's just unreal the way that the company has acted up to this point.
Unreal, and that was such great framing and context, and I wanna dive into it a little bit because, we criticized Grok AI a little bit on Twitter, and I've never received so much hate and backlash, and then I
Mm.
shared the news about Twitter, and tons of people being really hateful, being like, "Oh my gosh, this is about censorship," or "You just wanna control this, control that," and, "Oh, the internet we can't do this. If you try and do anything with the internet, blah, blah, blah." Think of any industry. Like, hey, we all depend on transportation. We drive, we need cars, of course. Can you imagine if a car company was like, "Well, we know if we add this feature and this feature, it's gonna be super, super dangerous. And then when thing that makes it even more dangerous comes up, we're gonna actually be, like, super lax and not do anything safe about it, plus no seatbelts. It's gonna be awesome, like and then people are
Yeah, and
dying,
no
they're
one
like,
can
"Hey,
sue
man."
us.
Hey, man, you know what? If we have to do that stuff, you're not gonna have cars anymore. I mean, let's be real here. Like,
Mhm,
to your point, not only do they choose to allow hardcore pornography on their website, okay, it's extremely high risk. They wanna do that,
mhm.
okay, but then you're not gonna do age and consent verification. Okay, you've just magnified the risk of rape and child exploitation 1,000 fold. Okay, and then when someone
Mhm.
reports it, you don't even take that very seriously. You would think that their attitude would be like, "Okay, listen, guys, we're doing this. We're going pro porn, not doing any verification. But if someone reports it, that stuff's coming down immediately."
Yeah.
No, the opposite. The opposite. They'll never take anything down and make it as hard as possible to report. I
Mhm.
mean, that's disgusting, and we just cannot tolerate that. I mean, for those privacy freaks out there and First Amendment absolutists, like, I'm sorry, we are not sacrificing our children on the altar
Yeah.
of absolutes. You don't have absolute freedom of speech or privacy in any other context. If the police hears a screaming child outside your door, they're kicking down your door and coming in your house. Okay? Like, I'm sorry,
And
but
what
you
ab
don't enjoy
Yeah.
that
And what about the
in any other
privacy of
context.
that child? Like,
Exactly,
what
which
about the
was
privacy of that
actively being
child?
violated, which
Mhm.
was actually being actively being violated through that, and you're just
Yeah.
saying his privacy does not matter because of your theoretical privacy as an adult to theoretically do what? I don't know. I mean, of course, you could say political activism or this or that, but it's also covering crime massively, which we
Mhm.
know, and it was in this
Yeah.
instance. So
Yeah.
and that
And
kinda
we
leads me
support
into
free
some
speech
of
on political issues or other issues.
of course,
We don't support that being used as a smokescreen to allow a
exactly.
platform to be lax or negligent about child sexual abuse. Like, they're just different. Mhm.
That's exactly right. Of course, we support free speech. It's just that you don't get to use it as an excuse to harm a child in a
Yeah.
criminal way, in a seriously
Mhm.
criminal way. And and like it's just you wouldn't that kind of logic wouldn't fly if a person individual predator tried to say, well, it's my free speech. And they do, by the way. They try to say that
Yeah.
it's their free speech to groom a child, to send porn to a child, to talk to a child about sex. They do try that repeatedly. It doesn't fly as it should not. Corporations should be getting less credence than individuals when it comes to, their
Mm.
facilitation of a crime. They're a
Mhm.
money-making corporation, okay? So, and that's even like a principle that of course they do have some free speech rights, but less than individual persons because they're literally in the business of making money. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Like they're a fictitious corporate entity hell
Yeah.
bent on making as much money as
Yeah.
possible, not like individuals. Um, but that kind of brings me into sort of some of the negatives because that is a crime. To know that you're in possession of CSAM is a crime, and yet the court said that that immunity would be Section 230 immunity did apply and would be afforded to Twitter for its facilitation of sex trafficking. They, in my opinion, very poorly reasoned decision said that this knowing refusal to refuse CSAM wasn't criminal, didn't rise to the level of criminal, which and wasn't the kind of they said facilitation under the law anticipated by the trafficking statute. They don't cite any support for that. I don't find that it makes any sense at all. And in fact, I think if a person did this, they would have committed a crime, and the
Yeah.
DOJ itself could prosecute Twitter right now for this very activity. So I think that was egregious error on the part of the Ninth Circuit. Of course, they're just doing their best, but I think they got it wrong. And so, the sex trafficking claims and the possession of CSAM claims, both of which have robust civil remedies for the victims, were, tossed out or dismissed or, Section 230 immunity was applied to Twitter for those, meaning the trial can't proceed on those claims. So, we're sort of at a crossroads here. Do we take the victory and proceed to discovery against Twitter, which itself is a victory and is important endeavor,
Mhm.
and we're going to do that eventually one way or the other, or do we kind of appeal what I just described, I think is really egregious precedent because now
Mhm.
we have the Ninth Circuit ruling in a case against Reddit on behalf of 10 children whose CSAM was distributed all over the site that, you know, Section 230 barred their sex trafficking claims, and FOSTA didn't apply. And I just want to stop there because it may seem like, oh, well, the sex trafficking apply in Section 230 to block it. Well, we've been through this before. The notorious website Backpage became famous or infamous for facilitating mass sex trafficking. And I'd like to point out, in the same manner, it was a website. It was just ads, third party ads advertising children and advertising sex trafficking victims that they were turning a blind eye to. I use that. I'll explain why I'm air quoting that phrase in a minute. But like that's what Backpage was accused of doing. They weren't accused of like physically housing children and using their website to sex traffic children. They were accused of allowing sort of these advertisements and images on their website, despite knowing that most of it and much of it was sex trafficking. Okay, that caused such public outrage. There was an explosive documentary, multiple attempts to sue them failed by Section 230 that had ignited our country to such a degree that Congress passed a law called FOSTA specifically saying that Section 230 does not bar claims against websites that facilitate and benefit from sex trafficking. So you had Congress actually taking action on this. And now, in that context, you have the Ninth Circuit still preventing sex trafficking victims from suing websites for that exact
Mhm.
activity. I mean, that's what it's so insane. That's why they're trying to say that FOSTA created a heightened standard and that in other trafficking cases, you would only have to show that the defendant knew or should have known they were benefiting or facilitating sex trafficking. But with FOSTA, you have to prove like they've criminal knowledge that you could prosecute them. That's how much knowledge you're showing of their facilitation benefiting. Well, like I said, I think you could prosecute Twitter right now. They had
Yeah,
actual criminal knowledge. They were in actual criminal possession of CSAM, which the court
yeah.
recognizes. They knew they had actual knowledge. So it doesn't make any sense. And you just have to wonder why. Why, if Congress moved to change this law, are you still giving immunity for the exact same stuff? And so you have them
Mhm.
doing it at Reddit. And then they did it in another egregious case of Grinder where a handicapped child was actually in person physically assaulted by adult men facilitated by this app. And then you have Twitter now, where knowing possession and distribution of exploitation material of a child through a sex trafficking scheme is completely immunized yet again. It's like a brick wall to prevent sex trafficking victims to hold websites accountable, despite a federal law passed for this purpose. It's so egregious that, that's what's kind of putting this crossroads, as I said. That is what putting us in this position of, can we really even leave that, let it stand, or do we appeal it because it's just so wrong? And, we don't, the only place to go from here is the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
It's not automatic. We'd have to file a petition for cert asking the court to take our case on appeal. So it's not guaranteed. And if anything, it's very difficult to get your case
Mhm.
reviewed at the Supreme Court as a general principle. And the Supreme Court has never, in the 20 plus years since this law was passed, interpreted Section 230, which is part of the problem. Although I
Yeah.
think they've hinted multiple times that they're ready to do that when the right case comes along. So there's multiple relevant petitions right now. That Grinder case I described is seeking review
Mhm.
at the Supreme Court, and so we'll decide if we're going to, and we'll let you guys know. But um, we're at a crossroads of the new internet right now.
Yes. Yeah. No, and that's so it's so wild. Just that, like you said, that brick wall that's being built, and it does make you wonder, yeah, do you need to go to the Supreme Court to try to rectify this? Do you move forward with discovery and trial, which is a victory? It is a victory to be at this point, although it's a mixed bag and there's things that are so problematic about the ruling. There are, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that when we were talking earlier, there's basically only 3 cases that we know of, at least off the top of our head, that have gotten any overturn on Section 230, and this is, like, the first case that has gotten it for sexual exploitation issues.
I mean, there's a small handful of cases.
Small handful. Mhm.
Yeah, small handful of cases that have ever proceeded against a web defendant on Section 230. And then when it comes to sexual exploitation, there's a couple Pornhub decisions, couple
Right, right,
couple of
which we're involved in.
which we are involved in, and But you have to think about, again, Pornhub had reached such a level of notoriety, like Backpage. I mean, you shouldn't have to basically get New York Times articles and viral worldwide attention for the court's supposed to be applying the law. It doesn't matter if it was a rinky-dink website or a massive exploiter. If they violated the law should apply equally. So it's a little frustrating.
Mhm.
Thank goodness we did get past it with Pornhub and several other cases that we aren't involved in, but relatedly, against Pornhub passed Section 230, and a couple cases against Salesforce, which notoriously assisted Backpage and kind of like developed
Mm.
their trafficking
Mhm.
scheme. But again, the level of notoriety, those cases got past Section 230, and that's about it. And so Twitter is now just added to the Pornhub Salesforce pile. There's three
Mhm.
entities that have had to face accountability in the history of the internet for sexual exploitation. That's just
Yeah.
unjust, just
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it does, I think, just can you talk about to the point of precedent and the importance of part of why we Nkosi has this law center embedded within it is to help establish better precedents to serve survivors and to achieve justice. How does that work and how does this help that cause?
Yeah, and it definitely does help because the court is saying that, your duty to report really doesn't have anything to do with publishing, taking the content down or not. In fact, you could have left it up and reported it. So that seems odd that you, though, then immunize them for the leaving it up part. But either
Yeah.
way, you can see how that could be applied in other instances where you had a duty to do something and you didn't do it, you don't get to hide behind Section 230. So, and particularly when it comes to CSAM, at the very least, now that you can be held liable for not reporting it, I would hope and I predict that these platforms will now massively take the responsibility to at least report this content when it's made aware to them very seriously. And that's going to have
Mhm.
practical ripple effects across the board. And we do want that, right? We want these platforms reporting this stuff to NCMEC so it can be hashed, to your point, Haley, so that it doesn't keep resurfacing. So I hope that this creates an avalanche in that regard of really supporting NCMEC's efforts and getting this stuff off when it's reported. But
Mhm.
we still have a long way to go.
Absolutely. And that is it is amazing how the private sector can respond and be more proactive in this. They don't have to wait for a lawsuit. They don't have to wait for Congress to pass something. They can just choose to be more aggressive in combating child sexual abuse online. And so we continue to urge and encourage them to do that. And I hope that this new precedent helps put a little bit of incentive on them to do that.
Yeah, and one other piece of the decision that I think will be important precedent and kind of goes directly to your point is, we the case that the products liability claims based on their bad reporting procedures proceed as well. So like think about that. We have it in the complaint and the court acknowledges it in the decision that activists had been calling on Twitter to have better reporting for a very long time. Like they were known for this. It was all over and we believe in corporate advocacy. We do it a lot. But see how it can only go so far, and that if it's ignored, they'll just keep doing it until now they're gonna have face liability. Guarantee they're gonna have robust reporting procedures, and their colleagues in this space are all of a sudden gonna have much easier and more effective reporting, and that benefits everyone. So,
Mhm.
that's another good, result and just, like, highlights the need for civil litigation. It's just unfortunately, sometimes it's the only way to get corporate change.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who are listening in the show notes, we will include a link to a blog that we have on this issue and also a really simple way that you can take action to call on Congress to change Section 230 so that it cannot be used as a shield against survivors having their day in court when a website is facilitating sexual exploitation. And I will also say, we'll also include a link to become a monthly donor to our organization. These lawsuits take a lot of attorney time and the survivors are not charged. And it does, like you said, Danny, great service to everyone when better precedents and corporate policies are set. So I do hope someone will check those out. But for our last topic before we head out, Danny, I also got a lot of negative pushback when we were talking about the Grok Annie AI character that has allows not safe for work features and would kind of get increasingly sexually explicit in conversation with users. And people said we're like anti Elon Musk. So we might get similar criticism for this episode because the other thing that we have to talk about also relates to X, Twitter, uh, their AI bot, their AI tool, Grok, which has started creating actual deep fake pornography through their Imagine tool. And we have to talk about this. It's not my fault that it's another X topic that is facilitating sexual exploitation. We have to talk about this. Very
Yeah, and I
problematic. Mhm.
exactly, and, and we'll get to, like, the severity, because I know you have of course, immediate world example of how severe this can get, but, in one of my posts about this that went pretty viral and got, also a lot of virulent hate is, I said this is porn culture, and people were very upset by that. But what does that mean? Because you have this Grok Imagine, which, you can use it to imagine anything, create fantastical, imaginative videos, images, GIFs. I am a fantasy fiction lover. Like, I love, all these cool, magical, fantastical,
Mhm.
books. I love Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, all this stuff. So I can imagine, like, you could create, like, a unicorn flying and, like, things like this you can't I'm not an amazing artist, I could make that. So that's a
Mhm.
very cool tool. But what does Elon use to promote it? He has a series of tweets promoting Grok Imagine with the different scenarios of how you can make a sexy pornified female looking anime person. Like, again, like,
Mhm.
he's enticing and hinting that, like, you could use this to create imaginative pornography with it. And why is that the first place we're going? Why is that the invitation you're sending, that your incredible tool that could do incredible things, inviting people
Mhm.
to use it for pornography? And how is that harmful? And I think there's a lot of ways, but I'll kick it over to you as the most current example of why that can be very harmful.
Yes, there a headline came out, I mean, I think just yesterday or early this morning about how the Grok Imagine tool is already being used to make nude imagery, AI deepfake, nudity of Taylor Swift. And apparently, this is even happening without it being prompted to create a nude image of Taylor Swift. If people are just asking for it to create images of Taylor Swift, Grok Imagine is giving them options that include her without clothes on. It's
Because it's
absolutely
a learning
horrific
model, because it's a learning
because that's
model,
what people are.
and
Yes,
Elon
yes.
has invited people to use it for pornography, so it is producing what it has learned, which is obviously a large amount. It's being trained on pornography. That's
Yes.
so disturbing.
It's incredibly disturbing. And yeah, like this said, Verge reports Grok Imagine users can create deepfake nude images of Swift without even mentioning nudity in the prompt. Just horrible. I feel so bad for her. I know this is happening to other. The problem is, Taylor Swift gets a headline, so this is what's being reported. But this has to be happening to other female celebrities, female politicians, like any person. Also, the girl down the road, someone who has a gross coworker who then starts using this to make images of her. Like, the amount of women who are currently being victimized by this, I don't know if we'll ever even actually know. And
X announced that they will be adding
ads.
advertisements to the results. So you put in a prompt, you get a result, and you'll get ads alongside
Mhm.
that, so that you will profit
Isn't
from
it
the response.
isn't it all so predictable? Because that's exactly why, in a way, Zuckerberg took off those safety controls reportedly when the Wall Street Journal did an article exposing how the Meta chatbot was having incredibly sexually explicit conversations, including role play conversations with accounts of minors. And it came out that employees at Meta had warned Zuckerberg that this would happen because he asked them to take off certain safety controls in order to increase engagement. And so then now we see this other AI tool leaning into the not safe for work or pornography deepfake space. And because obviously it's increasing engagement, they're going to be monetizing it. And it's just like so transparent that that is what the motivation is. But the problem is that you're just not monetizing a fantasy, an idea. You're monetizing sexual exploitation of real people who are going to be traumatized by the creation of these images. They're going to be used, like if it
To
hasn't
harass.
happened
Mhm.
already, to harass, to potentially blackmail or extort. I mean, we know
Yep.
cases. I know a case of a young person who was sent a deep faked image of themselves in the course of someone trying to abuse them and to try to make them feel like they had to go along with the abuse. Like, there's so many ways that this is being used to actually harm people, and it's just completely unacceptable, especially, and it's just so fascinating for it to be coming from the same company that is having such poor controls around online safety in general for sexual exploitation issues. It's just fascinating to see all of this coming up within that same ecosystem, and just clearly the human cost is not mattering to this company.
No, and it's this I don't know what it's gonna take for people or corporations to understand, but if you are going to engage with pornography and commercialize it, and that's gonna be a part of your business, you have to take into account the risks and the serious, serious harms, and that means robust age and consent verification. If it's AI, it's going to have tons of guardrails and limitations. And if you don't, you will be causing harm.
Mhm.
And it just seems like right now they don't care about that, which is very, very disturbing. And again, that's why I think we must have something like Section 230. And we can't allow, or we have to protest against and try and not allow things like the AI moratorium. We can't be
Yeah,
providing immunization for an industry and for tools that we know are unsafe and cause much harm without any kind of safety procedures in place. Like, we cannot
yeah,
do this anymore. I mean, it's reckless. We're going to destroy our society. I get a little frustrated because, some of the arguments are like, well, we have to protect AI at all costs and we can't have safety or we won't be able to compete with China. Well, I'm sorry. China is a dictatorship and porn's banned from the entire country and they protect their citizens, which who wants to live in a dictatorship? Not me. So you're trying to compete with a dictatorship and you can't. Okay.
mhm,
Well, also, I think we can. I think the free market in the end will win, but you have to believe in that. You don't get to just throw out the good of your citizens and throw out safety because you're desperately trying to compete with a dictatorship that has control on its side. That's what it has on
yeah.
its side. It can control and completely monitor a lot of things. And I mean, they seem to be advancing it without allowing pornography. So I'm struggling to understand why, like, similar safety here that
Why?
doesn't rise to the level of
It's
dictatorship
vital, it's
control.
vital. Pornographic imagery of every person that you could ever is, like, required in order to have a prosperous economy, I guess, or, like, porno
To
like,
innovate at the level of a dictator
yeah,
communist country?
abusing women with deepfake pornography is the price you must pay. Like, it's the cost of entry to have economic prosperity. Also, if you're it's so short-term thinking because, I mean, I can't remember if we've talked about this before. I know I've thought it before that if you want a country that's going to be competitive in the long run, you can't have a country where
No.
everyone is traumatized,
Traumatized.
because it reduces academic performance. There's study after study shows it reduces your ability to get things done in the workplace. It hinders creativity. Like, to progress, we need to protect people from sexual abuse and exploitation. It actually helps us economically. And we did just see pulled up in that article that technically this is against Twitter's or X's, sorry, policy. The acceptable use policy says that users are prohibited from depicting likenesses of persons in a pornographic manner. So it's against their own policy. This is a constant thing that I see with big tech, is that they have a policy on paper and it is not enacted in practice.
Yep,
Just very
exactly.
consistent problem. I saw here's a question. This is theoretical. As a lawyer, maybe you don't want to answer it. If Grok was a person, could they go to jail for this? Because the Take It Down Act was passed, which now makes it a federal law that you cannot share or distribute non-consensual image-based sexual abuse, including AI deepfakes of a person. And this is them creating and distributing deepfake pornography of an identifiable person. Like if this was a person,
And Taylor
if Grok
Swift,
was a
meaning Taylor
person,
Swift?
mhm, mhm,
Yeah, I mean, sure sounds like it, and I wonder if, like, if is Twitter responsible as the is Grok creator of Grok, and Grok is a tool Twitter is using? I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, sounds like it. Yeah.
but
And is the person receiving it, if they then send it around, have they violated the Take It Down Act now? I think
yeah,
that's they have, you know?
it's yeah.
Yeah.
It from as a non-lawyer looking at it, it seems like there would be a very strong case for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, big but so once again, it's just I want these companies to be held accountable the same way that we would want an individual to be held accountable when they're facilitating harm. Mhm,
Yeah, exactly. And, like, we just
mhm,
want to make the incentives right. The way if you offer blanket protection and this inability to regulate them, then the incentive is to do everything regardless of the risks, and to recklessly harm people in the pursuit of profit, which, by the way, isn't necessarily going to produce the best product in terms of like what we want as a society, what the direction of the innovation is also going to be influenced by that. For
mhm.
example, like, are we just going to innovate in the porn space and miss out on other
Right.
opportunities because that is going to
Yes.
be super profitable short term? Well, is that really what you want to incentivize? Because it's going to be profit motivated. It's not going to be beauty motivated. It's not going to be scientific motivated. It's not going to be philosophy or literature motivated. It's profit motivated, which
Right.
usually goes down to the person's basis instincts, what's cheapest and most and highest demand. And the other thing is, the incentive is like, which is built into what I'm saying, but absolutely no incentive to spend money on safety or restrict activity that would be harmful. So we just
Mhm,
need to be wise and create a regime which is really just the regular course of how we do business in every other industry, which is, sometimes regulation, or if you don't even want to regulate, let people sue when they get harmed.
mhm.
It's very minor. It's stop giving extraordinary, unusual protection to this industry, is all we're
Yeah.
asking.
It's all we're asking. That's all we're asking. Oh, Danny. Have you seen I don't know if this was a tweet or a quote, but it's gone around now and is in my mind a classic where it says something to the effect of I wanted my AI to do laundry and dishes so that I could do art and
Yes.
poetry. I didn't want my AI to do art and poetry, so I do laundry and dishes. And I feel like this is a even darker take on it. Like, I want AI to move us forward in science, to make us more effective at work so we have more time with our families. I don't want it to broaden the way that my
People
family
can
could be
exploit
sexually
each other.
exploited. Like,
Exactly.
that's not where I want that innovation to focus. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Danny, any parting thoughts? We are, I would love to be able to have an episode where we can hold up the company of X as an incredible shining example for child safety and taking these issues very seriously. I have no vendetta against this company in particular. They've been in the news for some very poor decision making that I don't understand that has led to their products facilitating sexual abuse and exploitation. And we call that out both with this company, with other companies. That's what we do. But I would love for them to change. I would love for them
Yeah.
to be leaders in this space and show how it's possible to turn things around and get your priorities straight and prioritize online safety. And they could do that if they want to. And
They
I would
could
love
likely
them to
do
do it
it.
out of the goodness of their own hearts or because they have to by law. Either way.
Yeah, or because of our advocacy. That's why we're doing it,
Mhm.
right? Like, I love Twitter. I'm on it, or X. I'm on it all the time. There's a lot of good things. And finally, Elon today shared a Grok Imagine image that was kind of like just fantastical, like a beautiful feathery, like magical kind of image. And I thought that's so cool. And I love the ways that this could be used in a really cool, interesting way. So yeah, it's not a vendetta. I would want more than anything for our advocacy to mean something, not also, we're not just speaking to hear ourselves speak. I
Screaming
would love to
the void.
screaming into the void. I would love to know that what we're saying and the voices of survivors and victims who are hard is listened to. And I
Mm,
think that these products would improve, and certainly customers, I think, in the end would be happy. I mean, there's a contingent that would be upset and frustrated, but I think the net would be positive. And so that is
mhm.
an invitation, of course, to X and to all these platforms, to put people over profit, as we've called them to do. And I think in the long run, that would benefit them. And hey, if we have to
Mhm.
shut down because of that, they'll retire happy.
Yes, I'd love to work myself out of a job. That sounds wonderful.
But in the
All
meantime,
right.
please donate to us because we need your help. We'd love to hire more lawyers. And if we do go into discovery against X, they certainly have more funds than we do. So we need your
Yeah,
help.
absolutely. Make sure to check out those links, especially the donation link and calling on Congress to change Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us once again in Ending Sexploitation.